affairs. It is not. Certainly, the fact that it has lasted for 81 years is a question of durability. It might not definitely amount to having worked for all the 81 years.
DP.
You need to protect me from Professor.
Professor Pudi.
But I would agree that, of course, there are necessary reforms that have to be undertaken. And the reforms need to take the shape of, one, membership. Membership to, of course, the UN Security Council needs to be addressed. We need to have representation from Latin America, representation from Africa, and definitely that needs to happen. Then number two, decision making, because the structure, functioning of the whole UN system needs to be amended. From declarations to implementation generally. Because clearly now it has formed a multiplicity of documents that you can read and go home. But in terms of what has been implemented generally, it is almost a complete nothingness. So we need to generally shift. It also needs to look at Africa not as a uniform whole, because it is not really yet a uniform whole. We still have exigencies of cooperation within the African body politic. But we can look at regional economic communities, for example. They can be contributing entities to representation. When you look at the East African community, you have been talking about the fact that, for example, Rwanda was summoned with the DRC to the United States. But there are systems that had been undertaken in the East African community. The system that was undertaken by the summit of the East African community, that was almost also leading to addressing the problem within the DRC. Then, including the system that was undertaken as a joint system between the East African community and SADC. They were all contributing entities. They had the resolutions that, notwithstanding, the United States now created its own system. So I can tell you that also the protagonists of problems are the big powers. Mm-hmm. Whether, of course, they are constructing material buildings for us, for purposes of it, it is a question of cause and effect. We had the personalities here that were almost, for example, Gaddafi. I don't know what happened to him and why, but at least I know that he had a contributing mind towards the construction of almost all these, including the African Union. Of course, that centers that would hold the entities of the African Union. We know how he ended. And of course, if you are now creating a list of innocent people, you cannot include the US in terms of his death. So we are looking at, obviously, what impoverished the African continent. Despite the historicity of obviously taking all our human resources for free, simply because those had the powers, we are also looking at the management factors and combinations introduced within international trade that also continuously cripple the earnings of the African continent. Professor has just told us in terms of how whether we can be in a position to export our coffee. When you see that the biggest exporters, the biggest traders within the value-added coffee, for example, are not growers of the same. When you look at Finland and you say it is one of the biggest consumers, where Finland coffee actually comes from, of course, Uganda is not mentioned. So, of course, all of those are arranged. We will fight. However, there is a role that African countries also equally need to play. Mm-hmm. The East African community is a very good organ. It is a sub-regional economic community. But in terms of negotiation for trade purposes, they again don't go as one. So clearly, it is also a problem. Now, when you look at the intra-trade within the East African community economic region itself, 14%. It is also tainted with a lot of blackmail, and they say your maize has aflatoxins. Then,
milk has hair.
Then we don't have a substantive product list. Then we continue now to insist that, of course, each country must now produce a list of products itself. There is still a problem. So fundamentally, we equally have a problem, but the major problems are also bestowed and subtended on us by, again, the powers. There is the fact that they participate in trying to grow our own regional economic communities are sometimes in relation to their interests. Exactly. But at the same of the...
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. Yes. So what the Africans and East Africans per se need to do is to, first of all, do a calculation. The factors and combinations, our interests put forward on the same table, weighed against the interests of the supporting entities. We can still survive and succeed, even when we are being actually quarantined by those with bigger interests and bigger powers. So the question, the UN has to definitely be overhauled. It has got to be overhauled in terms of membership, in terms of the veto power system has to also be deleted itself, because it is completely establishing the UN with all amounts of prevarication. It is postureless for you to say that a decision can be taken on matters to do with conflicts within conflicts of the world, for example, major conflicts, and you expect members of the P5 to agree. 2 of the 3, 2 of the 5 are actually active participants and the protagonists. Yeah. So there is no way they can agree to a solution that definitely is not something that is in their favor. So that is what we call postureless, chichi, and ladida, for you to expect that they can take a decision with unanimity. It is never going to happen, and clearly that is what has stalled all decision-making procedures and processes under the UN Security Council.
Lastly, I think I'll give an opportunity to both Professor and Alan so that we can have parting shots. Professor Puli, you seem to be pro this UN body to keep there after 81 years. Now let's get to what reforms you see need to be done.
Look, yes, the UN should be there. Because if it wasn't there, then we'll have other reasons to create one which looks like it, or whatever, in whichever iteration you want to put it. Because it does much more than meets the eye. But in the context of the decision-making reforms, unfortunately, if you look at the African common position on the reform of the United Nations, or the reform of the multilateral system, of course, which is conflated with the UN, what we call the Israeli consensus of 2005. What the Africa, and I'll just only pick one aspect of this. This is the reform of the Security Council, where Africa is proposing, 1, that we should have not less than 2 permanent seats. With a veto, if it still exists, but ideally with no veto. Yeah. Because we are saying that there shouldn't be any veto. Secondly, there is the issue of who elects the African members. Because, and again, this is something that we are very, very, very concerned with initially. Who is going among the African countries? Who is going to be in the council? Now, Africa, for purposes of the African Union, by the way, Africa is divided into 3 tiers. It's a 3-tier system in the continent. You have the big 6. These are countries which contribute about 45% of the African Union budget. We have the next 10, and then we have all the others. So the issue then was automatically these big 6, the big 6, and I don't know where you can go and do your research and you see who is in the big 6. So there was a stampede. If Africa is going to get not less than 2, then automatically it will be this country, it will be that country, it will be other country. But then the Israeli consensus says that it will be the African Union to nominate, to pick the African representatives. Now, can we have this reform? If we join when the veto is still in place, will it make any difference? You see, this is also, it's not about numbers, it's also about the decision making. Can you really make a decision as an African country? I think fundamentally these are the things that we need to debate as a continent. We have to have a conversation on that. The reform that we are talking about, whether it is in the Council, whether it is the General Assembly. For example, Honorable Mbidde refers to the veto, specifically because of the issues of Russia and Ukraine, the conflict in Ukraine. There is something which has happened in the United Nations, because traditionally the veto was used. Of course, again, you can go to the charter and look at Article 27.2. That's where the veto is institutionalized, where on every substantive matter you should not have a negative vote from one of the permanent 5, which is like a concert of Europe. If those of us who studied history, if you remember how the concert of Europe behaved, this is exactly how the Security Council behaves. Now, the idea was that, so if you cast a veto under the new system which has been introduced in the UN, you are supposed to explain in the General Assembly why you have used the veto. It may not go fundamentally to reform the veto, but at least there is now accountability. And these are the small things, and these are the small things which, because I can tell you, and as I end, I can tell you to get reforms.
That is such a moral point.
Yes, but to get what we want, that fundamentally you're going to reform this thing, that you go to the heart of the reform and you say you overhaul it. In the words of Alan, we overhaul. That overhauling, I can tell you, it may not happen in Alan's lifetime. It may not happen in my lifetime. But since I still have the microphone, Timothy, let me appeal. Last week, someone broke into my car and stole my laptop. I want to appeal to the person who took my bag. Please, take the laptop, but please return to me my book, which is Chinua Achebe's book, which I was reading, and my memory sticks, and my reading glasses. You can drop them at Makerere, just come and drop them at the gate, and you say, look, lost and found, and I will be a happy person. So please, yes, and this was in Entebbe. You can take it to Entebbe police station. You can bring it to Makerere University, and my names are there. They are my cards, and please, I'm just appealing to you.
Where was it stolen?
This is in Entebbe, and I would not want to mention the names of. Otherwise, then I spoil someone's business. But please, I'm just appealing to you. I'm using this platform.
Thank you, Professor, and I hope someone has had.
Thank you, Timothy.
Finally, who would lead these reforms?
There will be no reforms.
It's the same question I'm going to put before Alan.
The institution will reform itself as the countries emerge, becoming more economically powerful. We've seen the example of China. China did not require a reform to be made in the nations, be accepted as a permanent member. So as countries become stronger economically, because like I told you, when you make the money, you can only make the money if you have the technology. And once you make the money with technology, you build the military power to safeguard it.
Okay.
Then you have power around the world. So as that happens, if our small countries can compete, then we will be able to sit in BRICS and say, now US, this is what we want to do, and it will reform itself. But remember, the UN is a global institution. These others are regional. And look at what is happening in Ukraine and Russia. What has the UN done about it? Nothing.